Yo, I want to welcome everybody to Touch the Topic. It's your boy D from the D, and we got something deep we need to get off into. Today we're going to touch the topic on how laws dictate your life. I see a lot of people try to live outside the law. A lot of people, in particular, Christians, like to say that the law is dead. But the law is not dead. It's supposed to live in your heart. And a lot of these folks would rather live by the laws of different lands than the laws of the Most High. See, what we're dealing with is we're dealing with a kingdom that's at war with another one. There's only one true king, and that's Yahushua HaMashiach, Yahuwah's son. There's one that tries to bring us down, and that is the adversary, the enemy, Hashatan. And we won't mention his name. But the thing is that we get confused when it comes down to life. Life is based on laws. From the moment that you are born, there's a birth certificate. There's a social security card. And it goes on from there and there. See, it's better to learn laws and how to deal with them than to live lawless. But the law that trumps all is the Most High. I think that's something called a jurisprudence. See, I just ordered a Black's Laws dictionary, and it's my first day having it. I still haven't got off into it, but this is something that we're going to be talking about. So today, we're going to put on trial the United States. We're putting the United States on trial because the United States has divided us. And you ask yourself, how have they divided us? Well, racial politics. Racial politics has been used by government officials to divide us and to conquer us. See, the most important thing we got to realize is, as people of color, that's what they want you to say, but as black people, people that's considered black, and we're going to get off into that too because we're not black, okay? But we have been just thrown in a melting pot with everybody to keep us down. Every time we fight for something, the first thing they tried to do is take our freedom. They took our freedom. Then we fight to be free. Once we get free, then they turn on us, lied to us about the things that we would get once we became free. Then once we started to build on our own, then they destroyed Black Wall Street. Then once they destroyed Black Wall Street, we tried to get some rights to integrate. And then they destroyed that by turning our women against us. Once they turned our women against us, hey, it was all downhill from there. The woman became the head of the household, the kids growing up without fathers, and we running off to jail because we're unemployed and we're just dealing with drugs, using them, abusing them, selling them. And then came the war on drugs. So I'm going to show y'all today, this should change your mind about how you feel about law. Okay? I mean, law goes deep, and we're going to be talking about this all the time. Not talking about this particular topic, but talking about law. Everything has to do with law. Okay? So, we'll get started, but the first thing I'm going to do is I want to drop this song by my brother G Mac. I call him Magnificent. He wrote this some years ago, plenty of years, over a decade ago, but it's still dope to this day. And it has everything to do with this particular topic that we're touching today. Today's topic is called Racial Politics. The United States divided us. The United States divided us. And I also got an essay I wrote or began to write called The Great Divide. So we're going to get off into all that. And we're going to start out with this song here. I hope y'all enjoy it. It's called They Cheatin'.
We take a beat on a daily basis. I'm telling you they cheat while smiling in your face. Listen to reason. I guess I gotta make my case. These motherfuckers cheating. Double standards based on class and race. It's the definition of second class, whipping your ass to the point where you can't comprehend how it got this bad. From factory pollution to prostitution to being labeled as 3/5 in the Constitution, to being the coke manufacturer's main distribution. From black power revolutions to living clueless with no solutions to the problem of you so ruthless and hard-hearted but soft-minded, full of excuses. You see, the truth is niggas was really on to something in the 60s, fighting hard against the wrong and suffering. Just then Hoover was practicing crafty maneuvers, hard drugs flooded the slums. Guess who was the users and the movers? Us, but not the producers. They dangle silk suits and Cadillacs meant to seduce us. As a reward to the willing to help them reduce us into a group of distracted backwards niggas that's useless. Fast forward 40 years, man, the game is the same. Yet sophisticated, meant to play the players and drain every hope of us raising up and holding the power. A vicious cycle breeding psychos and ignorant cowards. We take a beat on a daily basis. I'm telling you they cheat while smiling in your face. Listen to reason. I guess I gotta make my case. These motherfuckers cheating. Double standards based on class and race. The systematic abuse of authority regarding the minority and its legal system built accordingly by royalty. When I scream for justice and equality, ignoring me. As a man, the law will not acknowledge me, deporting me. If I speak like Garvey, with a million men supporting me. But the KKK can throw parades marching like Normandy through the city streets protected by police. Apparent is the double standard horribly. The filthy beast wants more of me than is given in return. Would like to make a whore of me if I submit and get to learning like the exploitation, usurpation, cultural colonization. The original identity thief is taking the soul of this nation. Talking out the neck and the mouth. The U.S. is not America. What's that all about? 25 years ago, bankruptcy was cool. Used as a tool to refuel till it got leaked to you. Blacklisted. And overnight shame it still existed. So niggas took advantage. Can't stand it, so they remixed it. It's twisted. Get more time for loose cracks than soft weight. Cause crackers in the ghetto and that other shit is out. Take a beat on a daily basis. I'm telling you they cheat while smiling in your face. Listen to reason. I guess I gotta make my case. These motherfuckers cheating. Double standards based on class and race. In reality, billions, enough to fund millions of money making buildings and schools for little children, enough to have a pot for those who have not to plot and come up without pulling hitting on knots to end up leaking blood that never clots. Enough to stop punching the clock and jumping the jock of the punk on top. Enough to block every city block. It's the strong black dollar wasted, disgraced with smells of Versace green jeans and weed traces, replaced with name brand garbage. The lame plan targets the broke black folk who spend the largest amounts on the things that can't change a damn thing. Poverty brings pain, but we fresh when we complain. In a game without a strategy, actually in need of a war weapon factory and a powerful faculty. I'm talking about smashing they askins with rations, intelligence and action, demanding that we cash in. Let them have their fashion, build on what we stash in, boycott America and watch the walls crash in. On a daily basis, I'm telling you they cheat while smiling in your face. Listen to reason. I guess I gotta make my case. These motherfuckers cheating. Double standards based on class and race. We take a beat on a daily basis. I'm telling you they cheat while smiling in your face. Listen to reason. I guess I gotta make my case. These motherfuckers cheating. Double standards based on class and race.
Yeah, told you. That's what this is about. This is what it's about, fam. Laws have been put into place to keep us in our place as far as they're concerned. And now things are changing. You're starting to see a change in the people. So this is my my essay that I wrote or began to write, called The Great Divide. And it goes like this. If you're like me, you're probably disgusted and fed up with politics. What is politics, and why does it drive everyone crazy that indulge in it and makes others run from it? When I was growing up, I've always heard the cliche, don't discuss religion or politics. I now understand the real reason why that was said. Some might think it's because you get people all riled up when you don't agree with their views. This is also the case. However, I see how they are intertwined to enlighten a man to choose between government and Yah. How can this go unseen by those who claim to be lovers of Yah and not of men? These political games that people play in government, they play every day, is nothing less than hypocrisy. Elected officials say one thing to get in office, but once they are there, they play by the rules that were set up before them, before they got there. Hence, nothing changes but the players, because the game, well, it stays the same. When Donald Trump was selected to office, he vowed to drain the swamp, and he did just that. He exposed both sides. I've never seen such a blatant show of disrespect and lack of dignity for the American people. I now see why people say they loathe lawyers and politicians, because they both know how to manipulate laws for personal gain. It's even deeper than that, and mostly no one knows how deep this rabbit hole goes except for the ones who dug it. But from the outside looking in, I say it leads straight to hell. Obama promised change, and our world did change. I guess this is when the LGBTQ people became a collective minority that had more privileges and benefits than a so-called African American man or woman. This is also around the time that Black lives started to matter. It is also when racism started rearing its ugly head via everyday people who consider themselves offended by the statement that Black Lives Matter, but they're not racist, but believing they are politically correct. Everyone is looking at what's going on, but hardly any seems to see what's going on. Yet the saga continues. Marvin Gaye once asked, "What's going on?" But since those days, no one seemed to care anymore. It's all about money, status, whores, and drugs. People are being forced to make choices that they shouldn't have to make, and some are taking vaccines that they shouldn't have to take. Dealing with viruses that are man made in order to change the world as we know it, and a massive effort to depopulate. How did Bill Gates become the poster child for vaccines and viruses? I've only known him to be a computer guy, and the only viruses he should be familiar with are computer viruses. But here we are listening to him on primetime news as if he's an expert on vaccinations and viruses. I suggest you look into that. America, as well as the rest of the world, is under attack and on fire. While the news is busy blowing smoke up everybody's rectum. It amazes me to see such a large assembly of supposed competent men and women who just can't seem to get the job done correctly and on time, but dealing personally with public matters, acting like a bunch of childish high school teenagers. It's crazy the way that they play with people's lives. The very same people that voted them into office in hopes that they would do the jobs that they vowed to do. Instead, when they get there, they want to talk about how difficult it is to get the job done in a government that is meant to be for the people and by the people. This strikes me as shocking. How can they time and time again get away with robbing the public of their wages while producing very little, if any, results? If this is a republic, what does that really mean? Because all I hear is that we are a democracy mockingly. No matter what one decides to call it, it is failing and falling quick. Since the days of slavery, Jim Crow, and the Civil Rights Movement, melanated Americans have been under attack by racists from all sides. Most have taken off their white sheets for suits, uniforms, and camouflage. We see these folks every day claiming themselves to be patriots, but really they are racists seeking a time when they considered America great. They are looking to repeat a horrible part of history in hopes of surviving the inevitable. They hate what America has become and what it is intended to be. The playing field is leveling, and that makes it harder to survive and keep privilege. Their rhetoric stands out. We had nothing to do with slavery, yet they still want to retain the benefits of it and have everything to do with keeping the descendants of slaves oppressed. Now that is my essay that I began to write called The Great Divide. And I just think that it has a lot of gems in it that you need to research. So we're gonna get on. We're gonna get on to the other part of our show, the main part. Like I said, this is called Racial Politics. The United States divided us. And it's a shame what we have to go through. It's a shame what we have to go through. In the future, I'm going to be taking calls. The phone number is 217-2782. That's 217-2782. Area code 313. Forgive me, y'all. But I'm trying to set this up for you right quick. So, as I said, this is our show. Touch the topic. I want to welcome everybody to it, and let's check it out. Here we go.
It was Barack Obama's first church service since resigning from Trinity United Church of Christ. Visiting a Southside Chicago congregation, he talks personally on the role of faith in his life.
People ask me sometimes, how do you manage all this? Folks talking about you on cable, and I said, trust in the Lord. I trust in the Lord. He looks after me. Every day.
With his wife and daughters looking on, Obama delivers a broader Father's Day message, calling on fathers, especially in the African American community, to play a greater role in their children's lives.
But if we're honest with ourselves, we'll admit that too many fathers are also missing. Too many fathers are MIA. Too many fathers are AWOL, missing from too many lives and too many homes. They've abandoned their responsibilities. They're acting like boys instead of men.
Black men found themselves suddenly disposable, no longer necessary to the functioning of the U.S. economy, precisely at the same moment that a backlash was brewing against the civil rights movement, a backlash that made it convenient for politicians to demonize black men as criminals, as shiftless, as unwilling to work. And so this war on drugs was declared, and black men found that they were no longer needed to work in the fields, no longer needed to labor in factories, and they found themselves scapegoats, pawns in political games, the enemy in a new war, and were rounded up by the millions, locked up, and then permanently locked out. And now, decades later, we stand back and say, what's wrong with these people? Why are they killing each other? Why is there so much violence in these communities that we have abandoned? Communities where good schools cannot be found, but high-tech prisons are a drive away. What's wrong with them? I think the deeper question, the more profound question, is what is wrong with us?
My position is that the black woman's disrespect and rebellion against the leadership and the authority of the black man is a direct cause of the breakdown in our black family structure. Now, of course, there are many black people who consider those fighting words, because as black women, we have never been subject to the kind of examination that our men have been subject to since we have been here. We have been somewhat protected and shielded from any kind of critiquing about our personal behavior, whereas our men have always been up for examination. The book is not an attack on black women. I have never said that all black women do everything that I list in my book. None of us have lived long enough to do everything that I list in the book, but most of us do some of the things that I've listed in my book. And I do say that it is not because of generalizations that we are all victimized by some of the negative patterns of behavior in the book, but the book just represents our collective contribution. This is some of everything that we have done or that we do daily that contributes to the breakup of our relationship, the destruction of our man, and the failure of our children to be able to function. They did not tell us that all of that, being my own person and I'm independent, would lead to separation, loneliness, celibacy, and lesbianism. They didn't tell us that if you give up the man, you're going to take one of these things and it's worse and it will destroy your nation. They didn't give us that information. They made us think that it was some kind of glorified position to brag about the fact that I got my own job, my own credit card, my own car, so I don't need no man. I don't even know how we got that mixed up. Ain't none of that got nothing to do with being with no man. We have some serious relationship problems that nobody has been able to address us on because everybody wants to pretend that this is not going on. Over 60% of our women are single, widowed, separated, or divorced. They don't have a man. I just came out of Florida and they got a housing complex that the Urban League built, which is a black organization that is for women and children only. They say they don't allow any men in there. I didn't have time to deal with it, but I talked about them real bad. That's the silliest program I've ever heard of. You know them women that had men if they got a bunch of children. They need fathers. They need protection. We hear about the drug problem that we have in our projects across the country. It's one of the major places that we have a drug problem. We talk about the great strength that we have as black women. Well, the welfare department don't rent government apartments to single black men. Those apartments belong to black women who are allowing this to go on in their home. We have not looked at what part of the responsibility do we share. Yes, black men sell a lot of drugs, and a lot of us black women get the money from them drugs and buy some of these fancy clothes we wear. Drive around in some of these fancy cars. He is not doing these things alone and without support from us, whether they are good or bad. See, we have a lot of power. We are very strong women. I'm saying that we're using our strength in the wrong direction. We're using it to tear our man down, tear our nation down instead of building it up. Having an education and a job does not necessarily mean you have a successful life. I keep telling black women that to raise a child, they say, well, I provided with food, clothing, and shelter. That's not raising a child, that's maintaining one. To raise a child, you need a parental coalition of a man and a woman. We have sons who, by not having a father in the home, they don't know how to respect women. They take on the black female emotionism. They're doubtful, they're indecisive, they can't make a decision. They don't know what to do about being a man because we can't teach them that. We don't have that knowledge. We have daughters who grow up in a home where they don't see any affection, where there's no man there. They go out into the world and try to mate. They don't have no idea how to be no woman to no man, how to function in a house with a man, because they haven't seen it. Most of our children, just like us, get all the information we have about how you be with a mate off television. It's the only medium that shows us anybody being together. Those rules have not worked for us. The white woman's liberation movement, we don't have anything to do with that. We have not been under the control of the black man for over 500 years, so what do we have to get liberated from them from? They haven't been our boss. That's the white woman and her man. They're going through that, and that's their business. We don't have any business being in that. They only introduced it to break down the civil rights movement. Civil rights movement started with the black man, the black woman, and the black child standing together, trying to plead for freedom, justice, and equality, and more benefits in the country that they had built. They threw the white woman in there with the women's liberation movement and made it a woman against man thing. That created a big separation between black men and black women because then everybody started going for self. Then they bring the welfare system in and tell us in order to feed and clothe and house our children, we have to give up our man. You have to put the man out of the house. When the white farm wife goes to the government for subsidy for the farm, they don't tell her to get rid of the farmer. They keep that family together.
the West and the Midwest, which meant that it was willing to undergird its white peasants from Europe with an economic floor. But not only did they give the land, they built land-grant colleges with government money to teach them how to farm. Not only that, they provided county agents to further their expertise in farming. Not only that, they provided low interest rates in order that they could mechanize their farms. Not only that, today many of these people are receiving millions of dollars in federal subsidies not to farm, and they are the very people telling the black man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps. Now, this is what we are faced with.
But in the black community, they make it a requirement because they want to keep endorsing into the black community that the black man is no good and that he is not deserving of respect, he is not deserving of us letting him give us any protection or instruction, and that we are better than them.
A lot of people tend to think that slavery is the reason why the black family's in shambles today. And it seems everyone goes back to that. We're taught that in school with slavery. A lot of the black nationalists like to use that excuse or that reason, however you want to call it. But I'm here to challenge that. The reason I challenge that is because if you've ever taken economics in school, or the family, or any type of family human studies course, you find that the black family actually, up until the late 60s, 80% of the children came from a two-parent home. So if 80% of black children came from a two-parent home up until the late 60s, early 70s, how would slavery impact that? Because clearly the families had it together. We had lower incarceration rates. So the black family did have it together. So what happened between that time? What happened between that time was was President Johnson approving the welfare system, which targeted black families first. What happened was, once the welfare system was launched, and three things, actually four things, I'm going to get into them, all right, one by one, and how they impacted the black family. First was the welfare system. Once the welfare system started, it encouraged black women to have children, but not to stay in committed relationships, or not to get married or have a man in the home. And that way, Uncle Sam will play the role of daddy. And you don't have to take my word for this. Just go yourself and do your research online. Or if I find some articles on it, I'll post it. Second was the feminist movement. Once Gloria Steinem, not Gloria Steinem, I forgot her name. I should actually be ashamed not knowing that. But the feminist movement, the woman who launched it had a magazine called She, I believe. And she put a black woman on the front of one of the issues in the early 70s. And everyone says that the woman who started feminism actually wrote that article. Ghost wrote it and gave this black woman credit. But it basically was a manifesto of how to become for a woman to become the head of the household and raise the kids by herself, and why it was a good thing. And a lot of black women read that article once they saw a black woman on it. So a lot of black women started abandoning the civil rights movement, which I think was a failure anyway. But anyway, abandoning the civil rights movement and joining the feminist movement, because they believed that rights for women actually came before rights for blacks, right? So that helped derail the black family and the black civil rights movement at that time. It kind of divided it, because a lot of women felt like, okay, so race is not the important factor here, gender is first. And they jumped on board for that. The third thing is, I would say, is the jobs. If you remember Reaganomics, or if you read about Reaganomics, that was the first time America really started outsourcing a lot of jobs overseas, or using technology to replace manual labor. So in a lot of these black neighborhoods where a lot of these black men worked that did manual labor in dangerous, like toxic factories, when those closed down, there was nothing else left. So then a lot of black women, of course, just saw it as a cash cow or as a means of survival. then I'll get pregnant, kick this man out, and then let me rely on Uncle Sam to feed the family because this dude here ain't working or he's not getting steady employment. I would also say another thing I'm going to add to that was the drugs, because once the jobs left, crack came in, and crack made a lot of poor black men rich, hood rich overnight. So if you're the average kid fresh out of high school, you're 16, 17 years old, your early 20s, and you've got no means, or even it doesn't matter the age actually. If you're just a black man and you have children or you have a family you're trying to support, and it doesn't have to be your own offspring, it could be just trying to help your mom or your dad out, or if you're in a single parent home, help your mother out. A lot of these guys got into crack. They got into selling crack, and this is how they were able to support their families. And today, when you look at things with the black family today, that played a big part of it. And last, I would say immigration played a big role in it, because what immigration did was it told a lot of blacks, affluent blacks, to not start their own businesses, not try to build their own schools up, and try to go to mainly white schools and work for mainly white companies. Now, a lot of people may attack me for this, but if you really look at every other demographic that came here, the Chinese didn't do that. The Chinese actually came here, and a lot of them were slaves too in America when they first got here. But what did they do? They pulled their resources together and eventually created their own economy. The Italians did the same thing, and the Irish, I always say especially, Irish came here after the black slaves came to America. They were actually ranked lower than blacks, and you could actually, please do your research on this. Don't just take my word for it. You could actually go online and see pictures of Irish lynchings when they first came to America. But what the Irish do, they say, oh, we're not going to go and try to join the Italians and work for the Italians, or go try to work for the white Americans or white Anglo-Saxons. They pulled their own resources. And a lot of the Irish, what they did was join the firefighter or police force, because this gave them protection and it gave them the means to support their families, but they never left their neighborhoods. They took that money and started opening their own businesses. This is the thing that the black people did not do. We took our money and we left the communities. Now, if you look at the black neighborhoods today, they're in shambles. You have mainly just the crackheads, the drug dealers. Um, excuse my language, but what we have is niggers. Not all, but most of black neighborhoods you would see what we would call niggers. And a lot of the Afro Americans took their money and moved out. So now I think it's actually, I don't know if it's too late in the game to change things, but to me, that's why it's not slavery. It's those factors of why the black community is in the situation it is in now. And just go online and type in black men 1930s or 1950s, and you see a lot of black men wore suits back then. They were well dressed, they were well groomed, they were well spoken, and a lot of them ran their own businesses until those factors came into play: feminism, the welfare movement, drugs, and immigration. Those factors actually contributed to the downfall of the black community. And I'm going to talk about the white community in my next video, and it's not going to be so favorable, and it's not an attack on them. It's just to educate white people on the same things that happen in the black community are coming to the white community, and we'll talk about that. So back to the issue, slavery to me is not what destroyed the black family, because every other group has dealt with some type of persecution in history. You look at Jews, of course, the Chinese, the Japanese, Filipinos, Italians, Irish, Greek. It doesn't matter what demographic you mention, they've all been through some type of persecution. But the only difference with them and Afro Americans or blacks around the world, is that they pulled their resources together. They didn't decide to leave their community was the way out. And a lot of them had their religion taken from them too. A lot of Latinos, Catholic religion is not the religion of their people. The Arawak Indians and the Tainos, they worshiped their own gods and had their own languages. So some people try to say it's because our religion was taken from us, but I'm not sure if, I believe it may be a factor, but not as deep a factor as the political mistakes.
A black child born today has less of a chance of being raised by both parents than a black child born during slavery. And this is due in no small part to the mass incarceration of black men. The first article to appear in the mainstream press, I believe, about this was in The Economist magazine, entitled How the Mass Incarceration of Black Men Harms Black Women. And in the article, it was explained that the majority of black women in the United States, including about 70% of black professional women, are unmarried, and that this is due largely to the mass incarceration of black men, which takes them out of the dating pool at the years they would be most likely to commit to a partner or to a family. But what's worse is that by branding them criminals and felons at early ages, often before they're even old enough to vote, they're rendered permanently unemployable in the legal job market for the most part, virtually guaranteeing that most will cycle in and out of prison, sometimes for the rest of their lives. Now, this isn't a phenomenon that affects just some small segment of the African American community. No, to the contrary, in major urban areas in the United States today, more than half of working-age African American men now have criminal records and are thus subject to legalized discrimination for the rest of their lives. It was reported a number of years ago that here in Chicago, right here in Chicago, if you take into account prisoners, if you actually count them as people, and of course, prisoners are excluded from poverty statistics and unemployment data, thus masking the severity of racial inequality in the United States. But if you actually count prisoners as people in the Chicago area, nearly 80% of working-age African American men have criminal records and are thus subject to legalized discrimination for the rest of their lives. These men are part of a growing undercaste, not class caste, a group of people defined largely by race, relegated to a permanent second-class status by law.
We represent the missing link as black women. The black man has been dissected, examined, the white man, the white woman, and the black child. But it has been us as black women who have never been examined. We have been protected, we have been insulated, we have been kept from any kind of criticism about our personal behavior in the home and outside of the home. And we have been given the false compliment that we are the backbone of the black nation. There is no doubt in any community in this country that the men in those communities are the backbone of their nations. There is no doubt in the white community that the white man is the backbone of his nation. The European, the Buddhist, the Korean, the Japanese, the Hispanic, all of those men are the backbones of their community, and there's no doubt about it. It is only in the black community where those values have been transposed and where they put that burden on us and tell us that we are the backbone of the black community, which is a direct insult to the black man and implies that he don't have no backbone and that his women have to represent him.
In order for you and me to devise some kind of method or strategy to offset some of the events or repetition of the events that have taken place here in Los Angeles recently, we have to go to the root. We have to go to the cause. Dealing with the condition itself is not enough, and it is because of our effort toward getting straight to the root that people oftentimes think we're dealing in hate.
We are oppressed. We are exploited. We are downtrodden. We are denied not only civil rights, but even human rights. So the only way we're going to get some of this oppression and exploitation away from us or aside from us is come together against the common enemy. Who taught you to hate the texture of your hair? Who taught you to hate the color of your skin to such extent that you bleach to get like the white man? Who taught you to hate the shape of your nose and the shape of your lips? Who taught you to hate yourself from the top of your head to the soles of your feet? Who taught you to hate your own kind? Who taught you to hate the race that you belong to? So much so that you don't want to be around each other. No, before you come asking Mr. Muhammad, does he teach hate? You should ask yourself, who taught you to hate being what God gave you? And I, for one, as a Muslim, believe that the white man is intelligent enough. If he were made to realize how black people really feel and how fed up we are without that old compromising sweet talk. Stop sweet talking him. Tell him how you feel. Tell him what kind of hell you've been catching, and let him know that if he's not ready to clean his house up, if he's not ready to clean his house up, he shouldn't have a house. It should catch on fire and burn down.
The Mississippi or the Alabama sheriff, who really does believe when he's facing a Negro boy or girl that this woman, this man, this child must be insane to attack the system to which he owes his entire identity. Of course, for such a person, the proposition of which we're trying to discuss here tonight does not exist. And on the other hand, I have to speak as one of the people who've been most attacked by what we must now here call the Western or the European system of reality. What white people in the world, because the doctrine of white supremacy, I hate to say it here, comes from Europe. That's how it got to America. Beneath then, whatever one's reaction to this proposition is, has to be the question of whether or not civilizations can be considered as such equal, or whether one civilization has the right to overtake and subjugate and in fact to destroy another. Now what happens when that happens? Leaving aside all the physical facts which one can quote, leaving aside rape or murder, leaving aside the bloody catalog of oppression, which we are in one way too familiar with already, what this does to the subjugated, the most private, the most serious thing this does to the subjugated, is to destroy his sense of reality. It destroys, for example, his father's authority over him. His father can no longer tell him anything because the past has disappeared, and his father has no power in the world. This means, in the case of an American Negro, born in that glittering republic, and in the moment you are born, since you don't know any better, every stick and stone and every face is white, and since you have not yet seen a mirror, you suppose that you are too. It comes as a great shock around the age of 5 or 6 or 7 to discover that the flag to which you have pledged allegiance, along with everybody else, has not pledged allegiance to you. It comes as a great shock to discover that Gary Cooper killing off the Indians when you were rooting for Gary Cooper, that the Indians were you. It comes as a great shock to discover that the country, which is your birthplace, and to which you owe your life and your identity, has not in its whole system of reality evolved any place for you. The disaffection, the demoralization, and the gap between one person and another, only on the basis of the color of their skins, begins there and accelerates throughout a whole lifetime, so that presently you realize you're 30 and are having a terrible time managing to trust your countrymen. By the time you are 30, you have been through a certain kind of mill. And the most serious effect of the mill you've been through is, again, not the catalog of disaster. The policemen, the taxi drivers, the waiters, the landlady, the landlord, the banks, the insurance companies, the millions of details, 24 hours of every day, which spell out to you that you are a worthless human being. It is not that. It is by that time you've begun to see it happening in your daughter or your son or your niece or your nephew. You are 30 by now, and nothing you have done has helped you to escape the trap. But what is worse than that is that nothing you have done, and as far as you can tell, nothing you can do, will save your son or your daughter from meeting the same disaster and not impossibly coming to the same end.
So why declare an all-out war on drugs when drug crime is actually declining, not on the rise, and the American public isn't too much concerned about it at the moment? Well, the answer is from the outset, the war on drugs had relatively little to do with genuine concern about drug addiction or the harms of drug abuse, and much to do with politics, racial politics. Numerous historians and political scientists have now documented that the war on drugs was part of a grand Republican Party strategy known as the Southern Strategy of using racially coded get tough appeals on issues of crime and welfare to appeal to poor and working class whites, particularly in the South, who are anxious about, resentful of, fearful of many of the gains of African Americans in the civil rights movement. Now, I think, to be fair, we have to acknowledge that poor and working class whites really had their world rocked by the civil rights movement. You know, wealthy whites could send their kids to private schools, give their kids all of the advantages that wealth has to offer. But poor and working class whites, many of whom were themselves struggling for survival, many of whom in the South were themselves illiterate, they faced a social demotion. It was their kids that might get bused across town to go to a school that they believed was inferior. It was their kids and themselves who were suddenly forced to compete on equal terms for limited jobs with this whole new group of people they've been taught their whole lives to believe were inferior to them. And then, to make matters worse from their perspective, affirmative action programs created the perception that black folks were now leapfrogging over them, on their way to Stanford, Yale, Harvard, University of Chicago, and off to corporate America. And this state of affairs created an enormous amount of fear, anger, resentment, anxiety, but it also created an enormous political opportunity. Pollsters and political strategists found that thinly veiled promises to get tough on them, a group not so subtly defined by race, could be enormously successful in persuading poor and working class whites to defect from the Democratic New Deal coalition and join the Republican Party in droves. It was part of the effort to flip the South from blue to red with coded racial rhetoric on getting tough on crime and welfare. In the words of H.R. Haldeman, President Richard Nixon's former chief of staff, he described the strategy this way, quote, "The whole problem is really the blacks. The key is to devise a system that recognizes this while not appearing to." Well, they did. And a couple years after the drug war was announced, crack began to ravage inner city communities. And the Reagan administration seized on this development, actually hiring staff whose job it was to publicize inner city crack babies, crack dealers, the so-called crack whores, and crack-related violence. Many people in here may be too young to remember that there was a time when our television sets were saturated with news about crack babies and crack dealers and images of black men in handcuffs and orange jumpsuits in courtrooms as communities were swept and raided. The demon drug crack hit the news. And as drug crime and blackness became conflated in the media, a wave of punitiveness swept over the United States. Legislators started passing harsh mandatory minimum sentences for minor drug crime, sentences harsher than murderers receive in many other Western democracies. And soon, Democrats began competing with Republicans to prove they could be even tougher on them than their Republican counterparts. And so it was President Bill Clinton who escalated the drug war far beyond what his Republican predecessors even dreamed possible. And it was the Clinton administration that championed the laws banning drug offenders from federal financial aid for schooling upon release, banning drug offenders and people with criminal records from public housing. It was the Clinton administration that championed the federal law denying food stamps to people with drug felonies. To a large extent, so many of the rules, laws, policies, and practices that constitute the basic architecture of this new caste system were championed by a Democratic administration desperate to win back those so-called white swing voters, folks who had defected from the Democratic Party in the wake of the civil rights movement. But of course, there were more than a few black politicians and black voices that were saying, get tough too. The crack epidemic in particular had created violence that was spinning out of control, and fear was sweeping many communities about what this drug was doing. And one thing that has become abundantly clear to poor communities of color is that if you ask for good schools, you aren't likely to get them. If you ask for jobs or economic investment, you won't get that either. But what we've learned is that the one thing poor folks of color can ask for and get are police in prisons. But it seems we got more than we bargained for. For now, here we are, decades later, with millions of people cycling in and out of prison, trapped in a perpetual undercaste. Now, I find that still many people who are familiar with this racial history will say, well, that's a shame too. But we still need to get tough on them, declare a war on them, because that is where the violent offenders are and the drug kingpins. What people don't realize is that this drug war has never been focused primarily on rooting out the violent offenders or the drug kingpins. Federal funding in this war has flowed to those state and local law enforcement agencies that have boosted the sheer numbers of drug arrests. It's become a numbers game. State and local law enforcement agencies have been rewarded in cash through programs like the Edward Byrne Memorial Grant Program for the sheer numbers of people arrested for drug offenses, virtually guaranteeing that law enforcement will go out looking for the so-called low-hanging fruit, stopping, frisking, searching as many people as possible to boost their numbers up. And the results have been predictable. The overwhelming majority of people arrested in the drug war have been arrested for nonviolent, relatively minor offenses. In fact, in the 1990s, the period of the greatest escalation of the drug war, nearly 80% of the increase in drug arrests were for marijuana possession, a drug less harmful than alcohol or tobacco, and at least, if not more prevalent, in middle-class white communities and on college campuses as it is in the hood. But by waging this drug war almost exclusively in the hood, we've managed to create a vast new racial undercaste in an astonishingly short period of time. Now, where has the U.S. Supreme Court been in all of this? Well, far from resisting the rise of mass incarceration, the U.S. Supreme Court has eviscerated Fourth Amendment protections against unreasonable searches and seizures. The U.S. Supreme Court has granted the police license to stop, frisk, search just about anyone, anywhere, as long as they get consent. And what is consent? Well, consent is when a police officer walks up to a young man, the officer has one hand on his gun and says, "Son, will you put your arms up in the air so I can frisk you, see if you got anything on you?"
How you doing tonight?
Doing well, officer.
Can I see your driver's license, registration, and insurance, please?
Of course, sir. My license is right here, my wallet. I reach past my 14-year-old son to get my registration insurance. Glove box, that's all right?
Sure.
Okay. Excuse me, son.
You live in the area?
No, sir.
Where are you coming from?
Picking up my son from a friend's house.
You on parole or have any warrants I should know about?
No, sir.
Are you aware your insurance is expired?
Must be an old copy. The card definitely has insurance. I might have a new copy.
Hey, keep your hands where I can see them, sir.
Relax. Right here, sir. Right here. It's okay. It's It's all right. It's all right. Oh, thank you.
Can I have you step out of the vehicle?
Sure. Undo my seatbelt. It's okay. It's all right. It's all right, son.
Hey, hands up! Hey! Wait,
Put your hands in the dashboard right now. Drop or whatever you have in your hands.
Put the phone down. Put that phone. Sir, it's a phone. It's a cell phone. It's just a cell phone.
That phone. Put the phone down.
I can feel
Get in the car and put your hands in the air.
Officer, please, he's just a kid. Please talk to him.
Please, he's just a kid. Exit the car with your hands in
He's
the air.
gonna get out. Okay, get out of the car, son. Easy. It's just a phone.
I need you to put the phone away. Put the phone away and sit on the curb.
He's unarmed, okay? He's just a... Please,
I need you to put the phone away and sit on the curb.
KJ, put it down.
Put the fucking phone away. Put the fucking phone away. Come on.
So you're saying, by law, you can resist the cops? Like, you can fight them back?
Yeah, if you didn't do nothing.
Who said that?
The U.S. Supreme Court. One has an unalienable right to protect his life, liberty, or property from unlawful attack or harm. Therefore, it's not an offense to liberate one from the unlawful custody of an officer.
So that's really what they're teaching with the white kids? It sounds like bullshit to me.
That's because you stuck in a school where they don't teach shit. If a cop don't conform to the law of the land, I can resist and protect myself. It's just the law.
What up?
Hey, just studying for the government test tomorrow.
Studying, huh?
What's up, Mr. Link?
What up, Jonah? What were you just saying just now?
Telling Jonah what we learned in class. He don't believe it. Like the law says you can defend yourself from unlawful attack. From anybody. Even the police, right?
Well...
He's crazy, right, Mr. Link?
I mean, he's technically right.
Technically.
Well, yes, in theory.
But the law is the law. A citizen illegally arrested cannot initiate the use of force. And neither do words alone justify an assault. However, when the officer initiates the assault by physical contact,
all right, listen to me. What I'm trying to tell you,
there's an unlawful
there's
arrest.
a difference.
There's a citizen has a right to protect his liberty
Look,
to the
stop,
extent
all right?
of killing the
Stop.
officer.
Don't say those words. All right? Don't even think them.
Hey, I'll be back later.
No. Stay on, Jonah. You need to hear this, too. Look. Citizens have rights, yes. There are all kinds of laws and documents and cases that say so. But the citizens they're talking about don't always look like us. Especially not to the police.
But the Supreme Court...
I understand that. But what you need to understand is those laws weren't written with us in mind. And anyone that tells you different is either white or just lucky they haven't had to put it to the test yet.
So I'm just supposed to forget everything you ever told me about self-respect and dignity and standing up for what I believe in?
Yes. If it means you coming home to me safely, absolutely. I know it doesn't make sense to you now, but one day when you have kids, it'll be crystal clear. Trust me. Look at me. When you're dealing with the police, you don't think of laws. You don't think of rights. None of that. You just do whatever they say. Their way. All right? That way you will live. You can live to make it home to me. You understand?
We're here live outside the LA County Courthouse, where, as you can see behind me, both protesters and police supporters are waiting to see if Officer Mike Randall will be indicted on charges stemming from last year's shooting of 14-year-old Kajani Jefferson.
Justice for Kajani! 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 Justice for Kajani!
After their exhaustive review of the evidence, the grand jury deliberated over 2 days, making their final decision. They determined that no probable cause exists to file any charges against Officer Randall and returned a no true bill on each of the 5 indictments.
Officer Randall will be returning to service, effective immediately according to standard protocol in such cases.
In your own words, what happened that night in July? Start from the beginning.
We were driving southbound on Virginia Avenue just after shift change. Officer Hollander and myself saw the white Civic cross the intersection at an elevated speed. Upon pulling over the vehicle, Officer Hollander called in to request backup. After directing the car to the side, we approached the car to find 2 black males. You and the deceased.
Kajani. That's his name.
Yeah. And then we...
No, you approached the car to find me and Kajani Jefferson. Say it with his name.
We approached the car to find you and Kajani Jefferson seated in the driver's side and passenger, respectively.
Approach from where?
The passenger side.
Close to Kajani?
Yes.
Continue.
The driver then provided an expired insurance card. There was a small altercation around whether the car was indeed insured. It was at that time Hollander asked him to exit the car.
And then what?
Hollander proceeded to search the driver. And that's when Kajani's hands reached out of my sight.
You pulled your gun?
Yes. Now, you don't know what someone could have underneath their seat.
But do you remember me saying repeatedly, I'm gonna reach past my 14-year-old son?
Yes, but a 14-year-old could still be grabbing for a gun.
But it wasn't a gun, was it?
No, it was his phone.
So you put your gun away?
No, we're taught not to de-escalate. No, once the gun is drawn, it's drawn. And for safety.
For whose safety?
That's what we're taught.
And then what happened?
He wouldn't stop recording. And so I pulled him. Kajani out of the car.
Put it down!
KJ, put right to film.
Exit the car and put your hands in the air!
KJ, put the phone down. I can film.
Put the phone! Exit the fucking car!
It's just a cell phone. Easy. It's just a
I
phone.
need you to put the phone away. Put the phone away and sit on the curb.
He's unarmed, okay? He's just a...
Put the phone away. Put the fucking phone away. Put the fucking phone away.
Get off him.
After the shots, what happened?
No.
I got in my car and went to my house.
You went to your house?
Well, that's protocol. After a shooting, you go home. You wait for your superiors to arrive.
Okay. You said the suspect sped through the intersection.
Yes.
You're still saying I was speeding?
Did you clock him?
No, we didn't clock him, but you could tell he was at a higher speed than what was posted.
If they weren't speeding, would you have pulled them over?
No.
So if the driver had the proper insurance card, what would have happened?
No, we would have let him go.
And Kajani Jefferson might be alive today.
What kind of bullshit justification is that?
Seriously? Since when do jury members speak? The only job that they have is to keep their mouth shut.
Well, guess what? You're not in control.
But there's a reason why courts do things the way they do.
Now, how's that working out for us? Anyone who wants to speak, feel free to speak. Throughout this process, everyone who wants a voice will have one.
Are you allowed to pull someone over for speeding without knowing their actual speed?
An officer can use judgment.
But is that the law?
Or do you just make it up as you go?
No, we don't. You see, nobody knows what our job is like. 24/7, get the bad guys. And we can all sit here and pretend all we want that all the blacks that get killed are killed by police, and that they're all unarmed, and that they're all good people, and that they're all just, I don't know, that the cops are the only ones running around trying to kill them. But it's not true.
Couldn't be further from the truth.
Everyone knows the statistics on black crime. How many blacks are killed in a year by other blacks? They don't put those numbers in the news.
Do you have the statistics on whites killing whites in a year or Chinese killing Chinese?
Whites and the Chinese aren't the ones cramming the prison system.
They also weren't the ones brought over here like property.
Hundreds of years ago. And what does that have to do with anything that we're talking about?
You don't find it interesting that the people brought over here in chains are still in chains?
No, I don't. Okay? The slavery thing is a fucking cop-out. It happened. Get over it. It ain't my job to make sense of it. It's my job. It's our job to get the bad people off the street. Black, white, whatever color.
Systematic violence and terror aimed at one group of people, and you just said get over it. Would you say that about the Holocaust?
Or women's rights?
It's not the same.
How's it different? The things women have been through in this country, in the military, on the force.
Are you supporting his side?
I'm supporting my side. I'm a cop, and I dare anyone in here question my loyalty to that. But I'm also a woman, a Latina woman at that, so I know how things in the past affect things happening now.
I can see that. You know, for women, and definitely for the Holocaust. But for them?
Why is it so hard for you to empathize with black people?
Because you guys make it hard.
That's more of that racist shit right there.
No, that's the fucking problem. That's the problem in this country. Anytime someone speaks the truth, they're labeled a racist. Let me tell you something. The KKK is racist. Nazis are racist.
So the only people that can be racist are those that are in the KKK or the Nazis. Anybody else by default is cool, is what you're saying.
I mean, like, fuck, even right now, I feel like I might say the wrong thing. And I'm not racist. I know that. I don't see color.
You colorblind?
You know what I mean.
No, I'm just saying, you said you colorblind.
I mean, I don't treat people differently based on the color of their skin. Any one of these guys will tell you that. I've had partners of all colors. And you know, frankly, I haven't met many racist cops. We have a black captain, for Christ's sakes.
Meaning what?
Meaning that it's fucking impossible for us to be racist.
Impossible? That's
yes.
Like saying it's impossible to be sexist because you're married to a woman. Programming is programming. When a person buys into a system or a culture that teaches that racism, that dominance, that person, if they black, they white, Chinese, whatever color they are, they're going to proudly reflect that culture in every situation.
So what you're saying is that it's possible for a black cop to be racist towards another black, to target him or shoot him based on a bias.
Hell yeah, you probably shoot him twice.
Oh, that's bullshit! Come on, you guys, you just... Never mind.
No, I'm gone. Say your piece.
I'm just saying, you guys want to cry race, but a lot of the things that black people have to deal with is based on the way black people act. Look at hip-hop music. What is, drug the hoe, get the hoe, shoot the bitch, do the, whatever the fuck. What do you expect? And you think I want my daughter to hang around with people that think that way? I mean, let alone come to my house. Hell no.
But you let your kids listen to it and buy it, right? Those are the dollars that keep it getting made. White people buy the music that blacks pay for with their lives. The black kids think they have to live that life to make the music so your daughter can go buy it. It's a cycle. It happens again and again and again.
What, are you saying this is our fault?
He's making a point. No matter how bullshit the music is, y'all appropriate it, fetishize it. The demand rises, the profits rise, the sales rise. Then it's just blacks and Latinos exploited for the supply.
You all just reach and reach. Or maybe blacks and Latinos aren't all victims. Maybe they are the actual thugs that they're saying they are in their music.
Pero qué puta te pasa, cabrón. Te estaba escuchando por horas corriendo esa boca de mierda, apoyando a estos hijos de puta como que si saliste de la misma pepa.
You don't know me, homie. You don't know anything about me, bro.
No te tengo que conocer para saber que sos ese pedazo de mierda que se vende y se gana esos rangos al aplastar a su propia raza.
I'm crushing my people? I'm crushing my people, you fucking cartel wannabe? Huh? You think you know me? You think you know me? You think you know anything about me? Huh? Fucking your gang tattoos, you think you're all fucking hard, huh? Killing, pushing drugs, selling little girls, and you think you're fucking better than me? Nah, dog, you don't know me, homie. You don't know shit about me, huh? Fucking you make it impossible for fucking Hispanic or Latino people to get ahead in this fucking country because all they see is you. And your fucking tattoos and your fucking gangster shit.
Mis tatuajes te dijeron todo eso. Mis tatuajes que claramente puedes ver dónde estás. Es increíble, te están usando. Te están usando como un perro y ni cuenta te das. My sad loss, bro.
Fuck you.
Kind of proves my point. Two Hispanic guys arguing. It's heated, but is it racial? No. Black guys, white guys, Hispanic guys. The thing that separates us isn't race. It's class. It's education.
You have kids?
Yeah, I got 2 girls.
They go to public school?
No, I work my ass off so they don't have to.
Why? Why not public school? What's wrong with that? I mean, if all a person has to do is get an education, then why does it matter where they get it? You know why? Because private schools are built like colleges. And public schools, where little brown and black kids are, they're built like prisons. So it's no surprise when private school kids go to college. And public schools, like where I grew up, they don't even graduate kids on their way to locking them up. And that is a race problem, officer. But that's America, right? We don't fix the system. We just put a premium on the way to get around it.
You think black people are the only ones that have to deal with that?
No. We just sit in the worst position to beat it. Which is why I sacrificed everything I had to put my son in a better position, taking him out of where he was and putting him into a place where he could survive. But guess what? It wasn't enough. I couldn't save him. I couldn't save my boy, not from him.
Why couldn't he have just complied? None of you ever complied.
Because we're fucking tired. We're tired of being stalked and intimidated and getting our asses kicked whenever you feel
and
like
that attitude is why that shit happens. If y'all just took a second to think, then maybe you'd avoid all that shit.
If all of you took a second to think, then maybe you wouldn't kill so many of us.
I didn't mean to kill your son.
What you did.
I did what I was trying to do. There was a threat, and I was scared. We're trying to go home. That's the. No, I have a kid at home too. But I am a human being just like anybody else. You know, every day I go to work and I want to go home to my kid. I want to see my son. I had a split second to decide whether you were going to attack my partner or your kid was gonna reach for his gun. I didn't want to get shot. I wanted to go home.
We wanted to go home too. This is my son. This is my little boy. This is what was taken from me. He didn't ask to be born. He didn't ask to be black. And he didn't ask to get shot. Look at him. Look at him! I'm never gonna be able to hug my son again. I'm never gonna see him get married or have children. Officer Randall took that from me. The world took that from me. I just want justice. That's all I want. I just want justice. He took it from me. But you can give it back.
Why can't you just accept responsibility? That you put your son in that situation by breaking the law and going over the posted speed limit.
What speed were we going? What? The speed! What speed we were going? You pulled us over because we were speeding, right? So what speed were we going when we pulled us over?
It was over a year ago.
You want me to remind you? We'll get the report. Get the report, Durwood.
Listen, it's not in the report.
Why not?
Because I didn't record it. I registered it based on what I remember.
Okay, then what did you see? What was the speed? I mean, it's a residential, so it's 25 miles per hour, right?
I don't know.
You don't know? Well, you were there, right? Same car, same time. What was the speed? What 45, 50?
45, 50 seems right.
Yeah, you sure?
Not exactly. No, I don't remember.
Well, I do remember. I do remember because I was there too. I've played it over 1,000 times in my mind, trying to think about all the reasons why this thing went wrong. We were crossing Virginia at Lombardy, residential area, 25 miles per hour, posted.
Which
right?
is why 45 would have seemed very
Not
fast.
when there's speed bumps 20 feet apart on each side of the intersection. We were not speeding up, were we, Officer Randall? We were slowing down. Just long enough for you to see two black men driving through that prestigious neighborhood.
Race has nothing to do with it.
Are you standing by your story that we were speeding?
It's an officer's
Officer
judgment.
Randall, are you standing by your story that we were speeding?
What do you expect? The you driving in that neighborhood in that crappy car was suspicious. After 12 midnight, who's driving around in that neighborhood after midnight? The people are coming home, yes. But most of the people driving around in that situation are bad people looking to do bad things.
So you profiled us.
You are damn right I did.
Kid says, That's consent, and that young man just waived his Fourth Amendment protections against unreasonable searches and seizures. The police do not have to have a shred of evidence, no reasonable suspicion, no probable cause, nothing to engage in that search and that encounter. And while that may seem like no big deal, just an inconvenience, momentary humiliation, that gets played out over and over and over and over again. The New York Police Department reported that in 1 year alone, they stopped and frisked more than 600,000 people. In 1 year alone, overwhelmingly black and brown men. But the U.S. Supreme Court, through a series of decisions beginning with McCleskey versus Kemp and then Armstrong versus the United States, has ruled that we cannot challenge these racial disparities now in a court of law. The court has ruled that it does not matter how overwhelming the statistical evidence might be of discrimination. The court has ruled explicitly that it does not matter how severe the racial disparities are. Unless you can offer proof of conscious, intentional bias tantamount to an admission by an officer, they acted with discriminatory intent, you can't even state a claim for race discrimination in our criminal justice system today. So many of the racial profiling cases that I was bringing 10 years ago or more can't even be filed today. The court has closed the courthouse doors to claims of racial bias at every stage of the criminal justice process, from stops and searches to plea bargaining and sentencing. This has made it virtually impossible to challenge bias in our system today. Because after all, in this so-called era of color blindness, most officers, like the rest of us, know better than to state our racial biases out loud. Most police officers know better than to say, well, yes, Your Honor, I stopped him, I frisked him because he was black. Most police officers know better than to state their stereotypes or their biases or their racial motivations out loud. But more importantly, so many of the biases and stereotypes that drive law enforcement decision-making today operate on such an unconscious level that many well-meaning, well-intentioned officers can't even admit to themselves their biases. A well-meaning officer trying to do right, do his job, sees a group of young black kids walking down the street, their pants are sagging a bit. Officers thinks to himself, I'm gonna jump out, frisk them, see if they got anything on them. Thinking they're doing their job. Same officers see a group of young white kids walking down the street in their neighborhood, it would never occur to them to jump out, frisk them, have them lion spread eagle, up against the wall. Never occurred to them. Now that officer may not be meaning those black kids any harm, but those discretionary bias decisions play themselves out over and over again, hundreds of thousands of times, guaranteeing huge racial disparities in our system, which the U.S. Supreme Court has ruled we cannot even challenge in a court of law. But of course, being swept into this system with little hope of challenging the bias that got you there is only just the beginning of the odyssey for so many, because once you're branded a criminal or felon, you're ushered into a parallel social universe in which many of the basic civil and human rights, supposedly won in the civil rights movement, no longer apply to you. Discrimination is legal, countless aspects of your daily life. For the rest of your life, you've got to check that box on employment applications asking, have you ever been convicted of a felony? Doesn't matter how long that felony may have happened ago. Doesn't matter if it was weeks, years, decades ago. For the rest of your life, you've got to check that box knowing your application is likely going straight to the trash. Many people say, oh, you're making excuses for people. You're making excuses. I mean, when you get out of prison, it may be hard, it may be tough, but if you really apply yourself, you just hustle, get out there, look for a job. You can find a good job. I mean, you could get a job at McDonald's or something. Well, getting a job at McDonald's is no easy feat if you have a felony record. And in so many of the communities to which people who are branded felonies return, there are no jobs to be found in McDonald's or elsewhere. And some people say to me, well, people could start their own businesses or something, become entrepreneurs. I said, well, most people coming out of prison don't have a whole lot of money to invest in a new business, but even if they did, hundreds of professional licenses are off limits to people who have been branded felons. In my state, in Ohio, you can't even get a license to be a barber if you've been convicted of a felony. Housing discrimination, perfectly legal. Public housing may be off limits to you. Private landlords routinely discriminate against people with criminal records. As I mentioned, under federal law, you're deemed ineligible for food stamps for the rest of your life if you've been convicted of a drug felony. Fortunately, many states have opted out of this federal ban on food stamps, but it remains the case that thousands of people can't even get food stamps to survive because they were once caught with drugs. What are folks released from prison expected to do? You're released from prison, can't get a job, you're barred from housing, even food stamps. Food may be off limits to you. What do we expect them to do? Well, apparently what we expect them to do is to pay hundreds or thousands of dollars in fees, fines, court costs, accumulated back child support, which continues to accrue while you're in prison. And then in a growing number of states, you're expected to actually pay back the cost of your imprisonment. And if that isn't enough, well, get this. If you're one of the lucky few, the very few, who actually manages to get a job out of prison, straight out of prison, up to 100% of your wages can be garnished to pay back all those fees, fines, court costs, accumulated back child support. What are folks expected to do? I say, when we step back and take a look at this system as a whole, what does it seem designed to do? Seems designed, in my view, to send folks right back to prison, which is what, in fact, happens the vast majority of the time. About 70% of people released from prison return within a few years, and the majority of those who return in some states do so in a matter of months, because the challenges associated with mere survival on the outside are so immense. Now, most of the types of crimes that land people back in prison following their release are crimes of survival, or even less. Infractions on their parole or probation. Failure to pee in the cup, to meet with your probation officer on schedule, that can land you back in prison. Or crimes of survival like theft, shoplifting, passing bad checks, or crimes of despair like drug addiction and drug abuse. But of course, some people released from prison also commit crimes of violence. Now, we claim to care a whole lot about violence, and yet we have created a system which virtually guarantees that millions of people will be unable to work, will be locked out of the legal economy, that will be set adrift. We create masses of jobless people stuck in a perpetual undercast. And nowhere is that more obvious than right here in Chicago. Chicago has been ground zero in the drug war. It was recently reported that more than 70% of all criminal cases in Chicago involve a Class D felony drug possession charge, the lowest level felony. To put the situation here in Chicago in some perspective, and to put the violence here in Chicago in some perspective, consider this. The parents of the young men who are members of gangs today, the parents of those young men were themselves targets of the drug war in the 1980s and into the 1990s. In 1999, only 992 black men received a bachelor's degree from Illinois state universities, while roughly 7,000 black men were released from state prison that year just for drug offenses alone. They are the parents of the young men who now find themselves trapped in the undercast, too often venting their rage and frustration on one another. A 50-year-old African-American man told me recently a story about when he was in prison. He was in federal prison. He'd been sentenced to 18 years for a crack offense. And when he left home, he had young sons. And just as he was preparing for release for his federal prison term, his sons began to join him behind bars. And it wasn't just his sons, but the neighbors' sons. All the boys on the block were coming in too. The generational cycle had begun as father and son found themselves trapped, cycling in and out of the system. Now we have millions of people trapped in the system. Estimated more than 60 million people with criminal records in the United States today. Cycling in and out. What do we do? Where do we go from here? Now, my own view is that if we're serious about ending this, if we're serious about dismantling mass incarceration, indeed dismantling this entire caste-like system that views people as disposable, if we're serious about this, nothing less than a major social movement will do. And if you're tempted to believe yes. If you're tempted to believe that something less will do, that we can tinker with this machine somehow and get it right, few reforms here or few reforms there, and get this machine humming back on track again, consider this. If we were to return to the rates of incarceration we had in the 1970s or early 1980s before the war on drugs and the Get Tough movement kicked off, we'd have to release 4 out of 5 people who are in prison today. 4 out of 5. More than 1 million people employed by the criminal justice system would lose their jobs. Most new prison construction has occurred in predominantly white rural communities that are quite vulnerable economically. Now, many of these communities have been sold on prisons as an answer to their economic woes, and very often the benefits that prisons provide these communities are grossly exaggerated. In some communities, prisons have turned out to be a net loss, but nonetheless, communities across America have now come to believe that their economy depends on prisons. They need the jobs. Those prisons across America would have to close down. Private prison companies now listed on the New York Stock Exchange and doing quite well. They would be forced into bankruptcy. This system is now so deeply rooted in our social, political, and economic structure that it's not going to just fade away. It's not going to just downsize out of sight without a major shift in our public consciousness, an upheaval, a fairly radical shift on our part. Now, I know there's many people who say this is just dreaming, pie in the sky, there is no hope of ending mass incarceration in America. Just as many people were resigned to Jim Crow in the South and said, yeah, it's a shame, but that's just the way that it is. I find that many people of all colors view the millions cycling in and out of our prisons and jails as just an unfortunate but inalterable fact of American life. Well, I am quite certain that Sojourner Truth, Ella Baker, Dr. King, Malcolm, and the many others who risked their lives to end earlier systems of racial and social control would not be so easily deterred. So if we are going to honor them, we have got to be willing to pick up where they left off and do the hard work of movement building. The hard work of movement building. Movement building, I believe, must be on behalf of poor people of all colors. In 1968, Dr. King told advocates that the time had come to shift from a civil rights movement to a human rights movement. He said, meaningful equality cannot be achieved through civil rights alone. Without basic human rights, the right to work, the right to housing, the right to quality education, without basic human rights, he said, civil rights are an empty promise.
At the very same time that America refused to give the Negro any land, through an act of Congress, our government was giving away millions of acres of land in the West and the Midwest, which meant that it was willing to undergird its white peasants from Europe with an economic floor. But not only did they give the land, they built land-grant colleges with government money to teach them how to farm. Not only that, they provided county agents to further their expertise in farming. Not only that, they provided low interest rates in order that they could mechanize their farms. Not only that, today many of these people are receiving millions of dollars in federal subsidies not to farm, and they are the very people telling the black man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps. Now, this is what we are faced with, and this is the reality. Now, when we come to Washington in this campaign, we are coming to get our check.
It disappeared. Wait a minute. It didn't disappear. You might forget Martin Luther King was assassinated in April. The Poor People's Campaign was supposed to go to Washington in April. So the organization that mobilized it was essentially decapitated and thrown into chaos about 3 weeks before it was supposed to happen. Those organizations were being, as I said, once the Civil Rights Acts were completed, that was it. Government was through with us. They're not interested in restructuring. There has never been any interest in restructuring the economy for the benefit of the poor. I don't know where you're going to talk about the bonus army, go back to Shays' Rebellion. I mean, this is like the no-no. You know, this is a capitalist society. It's built on inequality and avarice in many ways.
So in honor of all those who labored to end earlier systems of racial and social control, I hope that we will dedicate ourselves to building a human rights movement to end mass incarceration, a movement for education, not incarceration, for jobs, not jails, a movement that will end all these forms of legal discrimination against people labeled criminals, discrimination that denies them their basic human rights to work, to shelter, and to food. Now, what do we need to do to build this movement? To build upon the work that is already being done in so many communities, including here in Chicago? Well, I think we have got to insist upon telling the truth, the whole truth. We've got to be willing to admit out loud that we as a nation have managed to rebirth a caste-like system in this country. And we've got to be willing to tell this truth in our churches, in our schools, in prisons, in reentry centers. We've got to be willing to tell this truth so that a great awakening can occur. Because unlike the old Jim Crow, there are no signs alerting you to the existence of this new caste system. The whites-only signs are gone. Whites-only signs are gone, but there's new signs that have popped up on employment applications, housing applications, letting you know who the unwanteds, who the untouchables now are. But the lack of signs, the lack of visibility, poses a real problem for us in movement building. Because prisons are out of sight, out of mind. If you aren't directly impacted by this system, if you don't have a loved one behind bars, if you're middle class, live in a good neighborhood, you're white, you can live your whole life and have no idea of what is really going on. I lived my life as a civil rights lawyer, not fully understanding what was going on. So if we are going to engage in movement building, we have got to make visible what is hidden in plain sight. We have got to pull back the curtain and help others to see what we have been willingly blind to for so long. And that means consciousness raising. It means having difficult conversations in churches, in schools, in all kinds of settings, forcing people to deal with, reckon with what we as a nation have done again. But of course, just a lot of talk isn't going to be enough. We've got to be willing to get to work. And in my view, that means being willing to build an underground railroad for people released from prison. An underground railroad for those who are trying to make a genuine break for real freedom. Opening our schools, opening our doors of employment, opening our homes, opening our hearts to people who desperately need, not just support finding work and housing and food, and they need that, but who also need love, who also need acceptance, who need to know that we believe in them and are willing to stand with them as they make a genuine break for real freedom. But of course, just building an underground railroad is not going to be enough either, shuttling a few to freedom one by one. Just as in the days of slavery, it wasn't enough to just build an underground railroad and usher a few to freedom. You had to be willing to work for abolition. I believe that today we have got to be willing to work for the abolition of the system of mass incarceration as a whole. And that means ending the war on drugs once and for all. Just end it. We have spent $1 trillion now waging this drug war since it began. $1 trillion. We're constantly being told we don't have enough money to pay our teachers. We don't have enough money for job programs, for economic investment in the communities that need it most. But apparently we had $1 trillion to blow. And we spent it locking people up rather than investing in the communities that needed it most. So it's time to shift to a public health model for dealing with drug addiction and drug abuse and stop criminalizing what is ultimately a public health problem for some. And we've also got to end all these forms of legal discrimination against people released from prison, discrimination that denies them basic human rights to work, to shelter, and to food. But last but not least, we have got to shift from a purely punitive approach to dealing with violence and violent crime in our communities to a more rehabilitative and restorative approach. Yes, one that takes seriously the interests of the victim, the offender, and the community as a whole. So we have got a lot of work to do. And if it feels like too much, if it feels like it just can't possibly all be done, I think we've got to keep in mind that all of these rules, laws, policies, and practices that comprise this system of mass incarceration, they all rest upon one core belief. And it is the same core belief that sustained Jim Crow. It is the belief that some of us are not worthy of genuine care, compassion, or concern. And when we effectively challenge that core belief, all of this begins to fall like dominoes. A multiracial, multi-ethnic human rights movement must be born, one that takes seriously the dignity and humanity of all people. And it's got to be multiracial and multi-ethnic. Because although this war on drugs was clearly born with black folks in mind, it is a war that has destroyed the lives of people and communities of all colors. And the same racially divisive get tough politics and rhetoric that helped to birth this drug war is now leading to another prison building boom, this time aimed at suspected illegal immigrants. So we have got to connect these dots and build a multiracial, multi-ethnic movement on behalf of all of us. But before this movement can truly get underway, I believe a great awakening is required. We have got to collectively awaken from this colorblind slumber that we've been in to the realities of race in America. And we've got to be willing to embrace those labeled criminals. Not necessarily all their behavior, but them, their humanness. For it has been the refusal and failure to recognize the dignity and humanity of all people that has been the sturdy foundation of every caste system that has ever existed in the United States or anywhere else in the world. It's our task, I firmly believe, to end not just the war on drugs, not just mass incarceration, not just any one policy or practice, but to end this history and cycle of creating caste-like systems in America. Thank you so much for having me tonight, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Wow. Wow. Ain't that something?
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, there you have it, folks. There you have it. Now you tell me what you think. You think the United States divided us? Or do you think we're dividing ourselves? The old saying is divide and conquer. Somebody knows what they're doing. And now it's starting to trickle down to other races. And people are starting to lose their minds. Simply because they want to be better than everybody else. Not equal, but better. It's sad. But yeah, that's enough food for thought. You know, I wanted to touch on one thing about the cops, though. You know, to be a cop, I just want you to know, that's a hero's job. You got to be a hero, okay? So don't be a hero and a tough guy all while you have your gun, you know, and the odds is in your favor. But then, you know, you use the excuse to murder young black men that you feared for your life. Heroes don't fear for their life. They give their lives. They don't fear for their life. So if you in the business of fearing for your life, you shouldn't be a cop. Because I don't understand how cops are not afraid of armed white men, but they fear for their lives when there's an unarmed black child. That's crazy. That is crazy. Yeah. Well, this has touched the topic. I want to say shalom, Shabbat shalom to all my people. Know what that means? All praises to the Most High, Yahuwah, His Son, the King, Yahushua. May He live forever. And like I said, you be the judge. You be the judge. You let me know what you think about that. All right. This is another one by my boy G Mac. Like I say, I call him Magnificent. And this one is called Poverty. Because this is what we have been left with. till we, come together and pray to our mighty one, our power, together as a unit, and start thinking about how these folks are moving. They are moving against us. They are at war with us. This is a war, okay? It's a spiritual war and it's a physical war. They are at war against us. And they use politics as a means to keep us down. One of the means to legally do it. It's lawfully done. You know what I'm saying? we got to get on our business, man. We got to become knowers of the laws, because ignorance of the law is no excuse. You done heard that. We got to know the law. A criminal should not become a criminal until he learns the law. Because you just trying to be a criminal, that's the odds of you getting caught are great. But if you know the law, the odds of you getting caught, we might not ever catch you. You understand what I'm saying? We might not ever know what you done did in the dark. But, hey, to each his own. Like I said, use common sense. It's about law, health, wealth, and most of all, spirituality. And sticking together, man. You got to stick together. Like I said, I don't understand how they call us the United States and we got two parties. That's not united right there. And from there, we divide all the way down. It's just black and white and so on and so on. But we're going to talk more about this. Like I said, this from my boy G-Mac. It's called Poverty. I want to thank y'all for listening and checking me out. And till the next time, got something good coming up for y'all. But till next time, peace, love, shalom.
Shortages, overdue mortgages, looking at the price tags like I can't afford this shit. How many relating to being in the red when the paycheck roll around and most of the checks spent? Odd jobs for ends meet on the side, then the ride break down. But to eat you gotta drive, so the move you make now, get a loan, you get on, and the ride fix from your sidekick with 2 weeks to pay back. It's like this, struggling and juggling, catch a break here and there, catching hell everywhere, almost more than you can bear. Bill collectors main objective, sell you more than you can afford, leave you in the darkness if you take too long to settle the score. Stressed and restless, pacing the floor, searching for a better way. Tomorrow brings more of the same thing. Brain drain, not enough to go around. Spend your whole life playing catch up till they drop you in the ground. Poverty, the problem that bothers me. Grew up and lived in this ghetto life in poverty. My car ties wobbly, the dark cloud follows me. I could be happy with life without poverty, but I see poverty, the problem that bothers me. Grew up and lived in ghetto life in poverty. My car ties wobbly, the dark cloud follows me. I could be happy with life without poverty. We drink beer and smoke marijuana to keep us calm in this twisted maze they call life. Through all the drama and the bad times, the glad times give us the will to continue on and keep searching for better deals. It's the barbecue, card playing, joke telling, rhyme saying, self-imposed distractions from the truth about the situation. No cash, no class, little hope for brighter days. We adapt and relax to navigate the twisted maze. A miracle. Poverty makes people more spiritual. Truth be told, it makes lyricists more lyrical. My heart goes out to my folk living triple broke, working hard for dough. Don't wanna starve no more. Amongst the bottom of the scallywagon, landing handcuffs and teenagers tucked in paddy wagons all across the globe. The forgotten in this a song for my people living just like this. Poverty, a problem that bothers me. Grew up and lived in this ghetto life of poverty. My car tires wobbly, the dark cloud follows me. I could be happy with life without poverty, but I see poverty, a problem that bothers me. Grew up and lived in this ghetto life of poverty. My car tires wobbly, the dark cloud follows me. I could be happy with life without poverty. A problem can't exist when the solution is present. This is a gift that I rap just for you as a message so critical. Every individual has a special talent that will balance out the pitiful. Farmers grow crops, barbers open shops from their God-given ability. Good brokers sell stocks. You can grant your every wish, pay attention and don't miss that specialness inside of you. It can get you rich when your heart is beating slow and your head is hanging low because your cash flow is poor. Focus in and be for sure that you're ready to escape it and lead this twisted matrix formulated plan of action using just the basics. What will be my product? Who will be my customer? When will I get started? See, now we discussing a time-tested method for success, and ain't no probably. Work your master plan and logically get out of poverty. Poverty, the problem that bothers me. Grew up and lived in this ghetto life of poverty. My car tires wobbly, the dark cloud follows me. I could be happy with life without poverty, but I see poverty, the problem that bothers me. Grew up and lived in this ghetto life of poverty. My car tires wobbly, the dark cloud follows me. I could be happy with life without poverty. Poverty. Oh, poverty.
Let's do things. Let's fly to Egypt and let's race camels between the pyramids. So what's the matter with you? You're just into money? I said, no, I'm just not into poverty anymore. Poverty anymore.
Man, y'all ain't gonna believe this. I just realized that it was on mute the whole time, but I'm gonna tell you, I'm gonna play it back one more time, baby. This is a jam. Check my man out.
Shortages, overdue mortgages, looking at the price tags like I can't afford this shit. How many relating to being in the red when the paycheck roll around and most of the checks spent? Odd jobs for ends meet on the side, then the ride break down. But to eat you gotta drive, so the move you make now, get a loan, you get on, and the ride fix from your sidekick with 2 weeks to pay back. It's like this, struggling and juggling, catch a break here and there, catching hell everywhere, almost more than you can bear. Bill collectors' main objective, sell you more than you can afford, leave you in the darkness if you take too long to settle the score. Dressing restless, pacing the floor, searching for a better way. Tomorrow brings more of the same thing. Brain drain, not enough to go around. Spend your whole life playing catch up till they drop you in the ground. Poverty, the problem that bothers me. Grew up and lived in this ghetto life of poverty. My car tires wobbly, the dark cloud follows me. I could be happy with life without poverty, but I see poverty, the problem that bothers me. Grew up and lived in this ghetto life of poverty. My car tires wobbly, the dark cloud follows me. I could be happy with life without poverty. We drink beer and smoke marijuana to keep us calmer in this twisted maze they call life. Through all the drama and the bad times, the glad times give us the will to continue on and keep searching for better deals. It's the barbecue, card playing, joke telling, rhyme saying, self-imposed distractions from the truth about the situation. No cash, no class, little hope for brighter days. We adapt and relax to navigate the twisted maze. A miracle. Poverty makes people more spiritual. Truth be told, it makes lyricists more lyrical. My heart goes out to my folk living triple broke, working hard for dough, don't wanna starve no more. Amongst the bottom of the scallywagon, landing handcuffs and teenagers tucked in paddy wagons all across the globe. The forgotten in this a song for my people living just like this. Poverty, a problem that bothers me. Grew up and lived in this ghetto life in poverty. My car tires wobbly, the dark cloud follows me. I could be happy with life without poverty, but I see poverty, a problem that bothers me. Grew up and lived in this ghetto life in poverty. My car tires wobbly, the dark cloud follows me. I could be happy with life without poverty. A problem can't exist when the solution is present. This is a gift that I rap just for you as a message so critical. Every individual has a special talent that will balance out the pitiful. Farmers grow crops, barbers open shops. From their God-given ability, good brokers sell stocks. You can grant your every wish, pay attention and don't miss that specialness inside of you. It can get you rich when your heart is beating slow and your head is hanging low, cause your cash flow is poor. Focus in and be for sure that you ready to escape it and lead this twisted matrix, formulated plan of action using just the basics. What will be my product? Who will be my customer? When will I get started? See, now we discussing a time-tested method for success, and ain't no probably. Work your master plan and logically get out of poverty. Poverty, the problem that bothers me. Grew up and lived in this ghetto life in poverty. My car tires wobbly, the dark cloud follows me. I could be happy with life without poverty, but I see poverty, the problem that bothers me. Grew up and lived in this ghetto life in poverty. My car tires wobbly, the dark cloud follows me. I could be happy with life without poverty. Poverty. Oh, poverty.
Let's do things. Let's fly to Egypt and let's race camels between the pyramids. So what's the matter with you? You're just into money? I said, no, I'm just not into poverty anymore. Poverty anymore.
Thank you. Touched topic.